Hey guys, Michelle from OG Rose. I wanted to hop on. I'm reading The Artist Way right now, and I'm reading it out loud to the children as well, which is a great thing to do if you're doing any kind of learning from home or in home, and just reading books out loud. It's a great practice, and it invites questions, and you can ask questions. You can about the work, or you can ask questions amongst each other. It's also a great way to expand vocabulary too. So it's, great practice, and I enjoy doing it. And I find that it's interesting the way that it sort of sets the tone for the room if you're just reading out loud, and often not like asking anybody to sit or, hey, listen, it's just you reading. You may have to ask people to listen if they're like intentionally disruptive, right? But otherwise, if it seems that when I read out loud, I do find that there's just curious listeners who come around and listen. Maybe they're playing some like building with Legos, or maybe drawing this or whatever, but mostly just kind of listening without really having to say, hey, everybody sit down, I'm going to read now. Not that the way of sitting down, I'm going to read now is bad. I'm just interested in how reading out loud, or like this kind of oral tradition, does seem to beckon people in a way that is unique, or has the potential for it to be almost an activity of participation, where like you are inviting by the very use of your voice in reading a book, that then invites simply by doing the reading of the book. Like the invitation is the reading of the book. It's not a separate thing. It's an invitation by reading the book. And then the participation comes in those who come around to listen, and who want to listen from that book. Anyway, so I just wanted to talk about a little bit about like what is interesting to me about, just reading out loud to children and in a home. And I think that's a very interesting thing that could be discussed more. But I wanted to talk about specifically something that I read in Julia Cameron's book, The Artist Way, A Spiritual Path to Higher Creativity, which I'm really enjoying so far. It's been tremendous. And there's such profound truths that she states so articulately and eloquently, and in simple but profound terms, again, very profound. And I was thinking about, I guess, is this chapter 1? I'm not sure, but I think it doesn't give like numbers, but I do think this is, if you were to say, the first chapter, after the introduction, and it's called Spiritual Electricity. And something that I found really powerful, I will say that like something that has really always interested me is electricity. Like since I was in high school, and I would do like I really loved art and drawing and things like this, and I used to be fascinated by like the power lines, right? Just these lines kind of connecting everything, and sort of the juxtaposition between the lines and sort of the negative space that they create, and the larger concept of like being connected in that way through these lines. And anyway, I'll say that's like one just little example of my kind of fascination with electricity. But it's always like stood out to me as a very poignant symbol. Like I remember I was dating this guy in college, and I had this thought of like, it's not, in a way it was nice that I could sort of think of being with him as a way to get away from classes and obligations, and sort of plug into this source of, enjoyment, and like sort of a pleasurable connection, right? But I also felt that was not fair to do to treat another human like that, in the sense of just using them for that sense of connection and pleasurability, even though we do desire connection, and that is right, but just needs to be rightly ordered, where you're not, using the person for that, but more so enjoying it as a mutual activity, I suppose. And maybe it was, I mean, I guess maybe the other person also found it to be pleasurable to be with me, for example. But there's something that felt like almost inappropriate to do, to use a human as that source of like the electrical connection, right? As in like that they were the sole source of it. I think that might be a good way to put it. I think we do desire connection. Obviously, even our infrastructure, like I was talking about with power lines, seems to want us to connect. We seek out connection on the internet, and in this day and age, or through radio waves, or just obviously the human connection to ourselves, to receiving a warm hug, or connecting our feet to the ground. Like, connection is a very big part of being human, right? But yeah, there are ways in which we can connect in such a way that is destructive too, right? Like, a bat smashing a wall is also connection, but it's not the right proportion. The proportionality is not correct. And actually, this concept of like me feeling a kind of it's just, I can't describe it other than like this sort of image that I got in my head about this electrical plug that I could just plug into whenever I wanted. And how that felt like I was actually using this person, and how that felt wrong in some way, though, I was maybe not, I should have been, if I realized that I was doing something I felt was wrong, I should have stopped sooner. And I if I'm thinking about my immature, well, I guess still have my own immaturities, but my immature 20-year-old self, I didn't probably stop once I had this realization. I let it go on and made it harder for myself and the other person. And I did. But I read this segment in Owning Your Own Shadow by Johnson, I believe it is. And they had like just such an incredible way of illustrating why this sort of power source from a human alone, right? Just thinking them alone as your source of energy is problematic. They talked about like the voltage, where the issue isn't so much that you're connecting, but that you're expecting this like massive voltage of energy to come through a singular person. I'd have to get the section and read it to you guys to really delineate the idea best. But really, it was talking about this idea of trying to get like some mega charge from like just a simple outlet in the wall, right? Instead of trying to get a mega charge from being in the sun or something like that, where you are exposing yourself to like the greatest source of heat and warmth that or one of them that we know as humans. And doing it in such a way that gives you the right, again, proportionality, the right distance, but proximity to receive the energy from that greater source, right? The sun, just to use a simple example, but it's like trying to get the sun charge in an outlet. That's dangerous, right? That's very dangerous. And so anyways, why I'm illustrating these points to say that electricity and that imagery has always been very potent to me, interesting to me, appealing to think about symbolically. And so this ties in too with learning more about the energies, as Luke has taught some classes at Parallax, taught a course on Gurdjieff. And so basically he talks about the energies and how the energies are kind of a sensation or an awareness of the movement of the Holy Spirit from the Christian framework and the Gurdjieffian framework. And so I don't know enough about it to delineate, on the energies in that regard. However, from what I'm learning about it through Luke and, sort of my own research on it, there is something about energy that is really the energies and their movement and their ability to move through that is so crucial to becoming fully human and being able to come into our fullest, for lack of a better word, like power and capacity as human beings to do so in a way that is not damaging ultimately or harmful or leading to illness or leading to broken relationships and broken connection. There's something about these energies that seem really, really important and sensibility to those energies. And so this idea of spiritual electricity, when she's talking about this concept, I was just kind of like buzzing, like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. Like thinking about the energies as it relates to the arts and creativity. And that's I think for people who have ever thought about these ideas for a little bit, they probably already made those types of connections about this sort of the flow, like when we talk about the flow state of being in art and being in the flow state of making art or creating, there is something that feels like, again, this electrical flow that's occurring, right? Being a channel for light, warmth, connection, something that's being like, illuminated through the art and being a channel for it. And so, it's in some ways a fairly known connection, but it hit me really, really powerfully again in terms of this concept of, spiritual electricity, and how it actually is, in a sense, very much so connected to through the creative act and the creative cultivation, the creative process. And in a way, like, it does make me wonder if even to create the sort of the neural pathway of creativity is a means by which I can access and allow and let the spiritual energies work through me, or spiritual electricity work through me, actually allows a lot of things that are often blocked in oneself, that it allows it to work through those blocks and work through the person's body, mind, spirit, to the place of actually, being able to, essentially be able to allow their creativities, and also potentially work through healing, work through issues they may have with themselves or with others or with their surroundings. It certainly does involve a type of creative act to even connect the potentiality of creativity being a means for healing, for example, like even physical healing in your body, because Julia Cameron talks about how it does seem to be that way. Like she was saying about how even the faces of the people who would go through this practice that she did, she writes out in The Artist's Way, changes people. And so, I guess I just wanted to share about that, and also say that it can be quite easy to, even in acknowledging and recognizing the power of creativity, all the while sort of having that be, what's it called? The disavowal, right? Where you say, oh yes, creativity is important, it matters. And yet, like, we've got these kind of unconscious and not even, they're unconscious and they're conscious to a degree, but there's like these patterns in our life where we continually sabotage or shut down or do not allow the creative process to happen, because we just, we write it off as unimportant or self-indulgent or not really as necessary, And so I'm just mostly speaking to myself, but I wanted to kind of give that reminder that to understand the cultivation of the creative process and understand its immense and enormous value, it is probably one of the most, I want to say maybe one of the most important things one of the most important things to do in one's life. Because if we're not, another thing that something that relates to something I heard in the Village Sessions podcast is that if we're not creating, if not learning how to create from our ability to be a channel for this spiritual energy or spiritual electricity, we will still create. We will create drama, we will create problems, we will create issues. We can even create symptomology sometimes through not allowing this creative energy, by not allowing the creative energies and spiritual electricity, as Julia Cameron talks about, flow through us and work through us. So, we will still create, basically. We will do it. We will do it no matter what, even if we don't think we're creative at all. The premise that Julia Cameron has is that every person is creative. And so I agree with that. And I also think that what it shows up as is, creating issues and creating problems when... that's not to deny the reality of issues and problems, but the thing is that there are such things in the world, right? Your pipes burst or something like this, right? But there is an ability to work with what presents itself to us, even in a creative manner, in such a way that we are able to allow ultimately a type of restoration or revival or rediscovery, as she calls it, recovery, discovering and recovering your creative self. So this idea of like being able to work in a creative fashion to not create issues and drama that otherwise would have just been able to be poured into your own creative expression, and that's not simply expression, but it does take expressing. It takes expressing yourself on page or on a canvas or on into your work, the artistic work. But it's like if you're not really owning the fact that inherently you are creating every single day, then you will create in a way that is not thoughtful and it's kind of an unconscious, just from your patterns that you've never really kind of thought about. And so, it's kind of, it can feel like a big task, but also like a very one step in front of the other type of task to allow the creative process to come forth through a person, and to honor it, even when you don't know exactly how it's going to quote unquote help or do anything or matter, right? You just do it with a faith, as Julia Cameron will talk about. And so, yes, again, we will create. So what are we creating, and how are we allowing ourselves to, become more of our creative selves? Because if we aren't, then we will still create. And it's also, to me, I think a lot about the energy, like a lot of energy expenditure goes towards creating when we're doing this kind of unconscious creating issues or creating drama or creating problems where there aren't any, or where now we've manifested them into being simply because we kept on thinking there was a problem, when really the problem was, yes, there was a problem, but it was a problem of the fact that we were creating in the wrong way, or with the wrong teleology, or with the wrong purpose, or with the wrong mode, right? The mode would be to be a channel, versus, causing all of the confusion that can come from, and lack of clarity that can come from the creating, when you don't realize that you are actually a channel for that spiritual electricity. And again, that's when people get zapped, that burned, people get ouched. Like it's a difficult and painful situation unnecessarily. So when people are still creating drama and creating issues, when they could be creating from their place of honoring and respecting the divine energies, or the spiritual energy that can come through them onto paper, onto canvas, into music, into dance, into how they create a space, perhaps. And so anyway, I just wanted to speak to that because it really struck me. It really did. It really did strike me when I flipped open and saw spiritual energies, spiritual electricity, and thought about how that would relate to the energies. And, again, healing, wellness, the movement of the Holy Spirit, the cultivation of life as art and art as life. So anyway, thank you so much for listening, and I hope you have a great day.